You've been told that being an empath is the problem, that you feel too much, that you attract avoidance because something in you needs to fix broken people, that your sensitivity is a magnet for exactly the kind of person who will drain you and disappear. And maybe you started to believe it. Because here's what nobody tells you. The version of empathy you've been warned about isn't the only kind that exists. And there's one specific type of empath that doesn't just survive a relationship with an avoidant. They completely dismantle the avoidant's defenses, not by being softer, not by being more understanding, not by making themselves easier to be around, by being the one person the avoidant's entire system was never built to handle. And that's not a flaw. That's a psychological profile. And if you're watching this, there's a strong chance you're already closer to it than you think. But what does it actually mean to bring an avoidant to their knees? What happens when someone who has spent years, decades, successfully keeping people at arm's length suddenly can't? When the emotional walls that have always worked stop working? When the deactivation strategies that have protected them from intimacy just fail? I'll tell you what happens. Something that's been locked behind years of emotional regulation and learned self-sufficiency suddenly has no mechanism left to hold it back. And it doesn't trickle out. It floods. That's not a fantasy. That's attachment psychology. And one specific empath type is the trigger. Most people assume that empaths are exactly what avoidants want to avoid. The logic seems airtight. Avoidance fear engulfment, being swallowed by someone else's emotional world. So someone who feels deeply, who connects intuitively, who picks up on everything unsaid, that should send an avoidant running, right? They got what they feared. Intimacy, attunement, someone who actually sees them. But that's not what happens. For an avoidant, most relationships are manageable because most people, even caring, loving people, are ultimately readable, predictable, safe to keep at a controlled distance. Psychologists call this the regulation loop. The avoidant unconsciously selects for dynamics they can manage and unconsciously distances from anything that threatens that management. But one empath type breaks the loop, not by pursuing harder, not by being more available, by being something the avoidance system cannot categorize, cannot regulate against, and cannot stop thinking about. What surfaces in them isn't comfort. It's obsession. That's not manipulation. That's psychology. And this empath type is a trigger. So what actually makes this empath type different? Let's get specific, because you need to understand this at the mechanism level. Here's what sets this profile apart and what it does to the avoidant in stages. Stage 1, curiosity. In the first interactions, the avoidant feels something unusual, interest without threat. This empath doesn't pursue, doesn't overshare, doesn't telegraph need. The avoidant feels seen without feeling crowded. This is the decoy comfort. It makes them lean in before their system registers the risk. Most avoidants don't catch it here. Don't underestimate this stage. Stage 2, disorientation. Around the point where the avoidant would normally pull back, something stalls the mechanism. They go to deactivate and find they're already thinking about this person more than they plan to be. The habit of emotional distance is still there, but it's not as automatic as it used to be, and that registers as unsettling. Stage 3, suppression failure. This is where the avoidant's internal architecture starts to crack. The empath's ability to hold space without clinging, to be deeply present without demanding reciprocity, short-circuits the avoidant's primary defense. The belief that closeness always comes at a cost. The feelings they've been keeping regulated start surfacing without permission. Stage 4, surrender. If the empath holds their own, stays grounded, doesn't collapse into the avoidant's distance, doesn't chase, the avoidant reaches a point their system has rarely, if ever, encountered, wanting someone they cannot simply manage. And that wanting doesn't stay quiet. It builds pressure, and eventually it breaks through. This is when the avoidant stops being defended. This is when the passion they've been sitting on becomes impossible to contain. Now here's something that needs to be said, because this belief keeps so many empaths from fully inhabiting this profile. It's tempting to think that being the person who affects an avoidant this deeply means you have to do something, perform something, manage something, strategically withhold. And that discomfort makes some empaths abandon exactly what made them powerful in the first place. But this empath type isn't a strategy. It's a way of being. The difference is this. A strategy is something you execute to produce an outcome. What we're describing is something you embody because it's already true about you, a depth of self-awareness, a capacity for attunement, and a refusal to abandon your own emotional reality just to keep someone comfortable. Real performing sounds like mirroring an avoidance attachment until you've hollowed out your own needs, journaling furiously about their attachment style, then acting unbothered in every text while internally checking their last seen timestamp every 40 minutes. That's not this. That's self-abandonment with a strategy label on it. The difference matters. Know which one you're operating from before you take another step. So, how do you actually inhabit this empath profile without losing yourself in the process? Because here's the truth. The thing that makes this type so powerful is also the thing that makes them most vulnerable to collapse. When the avoidant goes distant, and don't explain yourself. Don't fill the silence with reassurance they didn't ask for. Let the silence carry your presence rather than erasing it. Every time you hold your ground while they withdraw, you are demonstrating the exact thing their nervous system has never encountered. Someone who doesn't need them to be different in order to be okay. When the thought surfaces, maybe my depth is too much for them, let it be there without making a confession. Your depth is not the liability you've been told it is. It is precisely the thing that is dismantling their defenses right now. Trust it. And when if they start showing up differently, don't immediately soften every boundary to welcome them back to the comfort of the old dynamic. Let them meet you where you actually are. Let that be real, not a performance of being easy. You're only this kind of empath if it's backed by something real in you. The moment it becomes a persona you're maintaining, it loses everything that made it extraordinary. And I know what some of you are thinking right now. What if my depth is exactly what pushes them away for good? That fear makes sense. But here's what holding on to it is actually costing you. When you shrink your emotional depth prematurely, when you start performing detachment to match their distance, you erase the one thing that was finally creating real movement in them. You reset the dynamic to the one where you're palatable and they're comfortable staying defended. An avoidant whose suppression is already failing because of who you are will not interpret your emotional depth as suffocation. They will interpret it as the thing they have never been able to walk away from cleanly. And if they ultimately retreat because you refuse to be less than you are, they were never capable of the relationship you actually needed. And you have lost nothing you could have kept without destroying yourself. Let's bring this home. This empath type is not too much. It's not naive. It's not a wound wearing the name of a gift. It's what happens when someone develops the rarest combination in human connection. Deep attunement without self-erasure. Presence without pursuit. Emotional truth without emotional demand. For an avoidant whose entire system is built on the assumption that closeness always costs something, this profile is the one thing they were never defended against. You are not waiting to be chosen. You are being fully, groundedly, unapologetically. And that is what brings the walls down. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever noticed an avoidant respond to you differently than they did to others? Like your presence affected them in a way they couldn't quite manage or explain. Did they come back? Did something in them crack open, even briefly? Drop it in the comments. This community is navigating something most people in your daily life have never had to understand, and your story might be exactly the mirror someone else needs right now. If this video gave you something real, subscribe, because next week we're going deeper. We're talking about the specific moment an avoidant realizes they met their match, and what that moment looks like from the inside. That breakdown is going to change how you see everything that's already happened between you. I'll see you there.